No.
So we did, Brittany, oh, if you can hear that. That is South Carolina's state bird calling right now. And it's the wren. Very small bird, but very loud. That's so neat. So Brittany, do you know, how did the bird break out of jail?
Did it use its wings? I don't know.
Good guess, but it used a crowbar.
Oh! Okay, I get it.
And you may be able to, we're giving you clues as to what our class may end up being.
Yes.
I do have a riddle. I don't know. I've actually been able to hold my breath for several hours at a time, so maybe you could try this. But I'm going to attempt to try to hold my breath for, 15, 20 minutes. If you want to do that. So I'm going to do this, and then I don't want you to just stare at me the whole time, so we're going to come back to that. So I'm going to go ahead and... Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit, and we'll come back in a few minutes as to how I'm actually able to hold my breath for such a long period of time. Or I could just kind of let them in on the secret now. What do you think?
I think you should let them know the secret now.
The secret now? Okay, here we go. So I'm going to, as you notice, I'm going to let my breath go from my hand that I was holding up my breath. I did exactly what I said, right?
Yes, you did. I have one joke. Why did the chicken cross the road?
Why did the chicken cross the road? Tell us why.
To get to the other side.
And on that note. All right, well, welcome everybody to Camp St. Christopher and to our next Barrier Island class. My name is Dave Green, and I am the director of the Environmental Education Center here, and we are bringing you one of my favorite classes, Ornithology, which is the study of birds. Camp St. Christopher is fortunate and lucky enough to have a great diversity of habitats, and it is actually one of the hot spots in South Carolina for bird species. So along with myself, we have Brittany.
Hi, so my name is Brittany, and I'm one of the naturalists here at the Barrier Island program. And today we're going to be talking to you about birds. We're going to be learning some ornithology. There are thousands of birds all across our globe. And right here we have some characteristics. These characteristics are going to be something that they all share, okay? So we're going to dive into it. So right here we have vertebrates. So just like us humans, birds have backbones. And you at home, you can actually feel your backbone too. If you take your finger and you put it all the way down your back, you can feel your vertebrae, all right? Next thing is that they lay eggs. So somewhere in your neighborhood or your community, or maybe even on television, you see birds' nests. Now, if you're really lucky, you can spot a bird nest with eggs in it because all birds, they lay eggs, all right? Next thing is endothermic. So this is the same thing as warm-blooded. So just like us humans, again, birds are warm-blooded. It is very important birds to be warm-blooded, endothermic, because it means that they regulate their own body heat. It's important because if they're flying at really high latitudes, it can be really chilly. But if they're able to warm their bodies up and heat themselves up, then they won't be as uncomfortable with the really cool temperatures up in the sky, all right? The next thing is that they use lungs and air sacs. So just like us, they do breathe through their lungs, and their air sacs help them as well. Air sacs are also important for birds because it helps them be more lightweight so they can fly and glide through the wind a little bit easier. Next thing is feathers. So birds have feathers, and they actually have different types of feathers. For example, the primary feathers, which are going to cover the body that you see when you see a bird. And then they have their secondary feathers, also their down feathers. So you'll see under the bird, they tend to be smaller, a little bit softer, and they also help regulate the bird's body heat. Now, Dave, he is going to teach us a little bit about the different lengths of different birds.
Yeah, so I think it's just, birds are so different. They do share similar characteristics, but sizes and shapes, it's just incredible colors. So we're going to do a couple experiments. The first one is we're going to talk about wingspan of birds. So Brittany, I want you to kind of stretch your arms out. And how they measure the wingspan of a bird is from the tip of one wing to the tip of the other. And it is incredible. We're going to, again, the diversity of different wingspan sizes. So let's focus, and you're going to have to come in a little bit closer, Abigail, to see the smallest bird in the world has a wingspan of, believe it or not, about the length of my thumb, just a little bit longer. You could see the number 4 on this, but they have a wingspan of a little over 2 inches. And that is a bumblebee hummingbird, and it's found in Cuba. And again, a wingspan of 2 inches. It's just incredibly, incredibly small. Now, I'm going to give Brittany one end of the tape measure, and we're going to show you the largest bird in the world that has the largest wingspan on a bird. So right now we are at 6 feet or so, and I'm going to keep going because this is just incredible. The total opposite of the tiny little hummingbird, and I am going to stop at 12 feet. 12 feet is actually the wingspan of a type of albatross, and it's called the wandering albatross. It's found in the Antarctica area. They fly usually, sometimes for months, years on end, over the open waters of the ocean. So again, this just gives you an idea of the different sizes of birds that are here, which kind of makes it really neat to go out and try to find these birds. All right.
Awesome. All right, so now we're going to transition to talking about the rest of these characteristics of birds. So the next thing we have are beaks. So birds are going to have beaks just like turtles. So they don't have teeth like us humans. They use their beaks to eat. And we're actually going to be diving in a little bit to talk about the different beaks that we see in different birds.
All right. So we're going to come down onto the bench here. And as I mentioned, along with the different sizes of wingspans, each bird has its own unique beak. And as Brittany said, they have a bony beak, no teeth. They have more of something called a gizzard kind of in their stomach that kind of acts or functions very similar to our stomachs or teeth. But that's but I want you to focus in on the beak of this bird. This is a great blue heron, and it has a very long, spear-like, pointy beak, and this bird is a much better fisherman than I will probably ever be. But they will plunge that beak into the water and go after fish. They love to eat frogs. They will sometimes eat small turtles or even small snakes. And if you think look at the shape and know that the function of that beak is for kind of plunging into the water, going after different fish. Let's just use that as an example. I want you to think of maybe some tool or utensil that might be in your own kitchen that might function very similar to this beak. And I'll give you just a second or two to think about that question. And we're going to do that with a couple more beaks. So I brought with me, we have some tongs here, salad tongs, and this is has a very similar function as to the beak of a great blue heron. Very long and able to dive, plunge that deep into the water to grab those fish very quickly. Again, very efficient hunter of the water. So our next skull, and these are skulls, these are not real bone, these are molded plastic. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. But this skull belongs to a great horned owl. They are the kind of the nighttime hunters, of the forest. And if you look at the beak, much different than the great blue heron. their beak is, it's not near as long, but it has a curved point at the very tip of that. And this bird is what's called a bird of prey, and so they're in the same family as bald eagles and falcons and hawks and also other different species of owls. And they rely on speed and to pounce down on a mammal or sometimes snakes or other birds. And they don't have many manners like we do when we're eating. You know, we use forks and knives to cut up our food. They use that beak, and they also have very sharp talons or claws that they're able to use in order to kind of rip and tear that prey up into small enough pieces that they're able to swallow. So again, I want you to think of something that you might find at home that might function very similar to this beak. And I brought some scissors. And scissors are used for cutting paper, and they're very efficient at doing that. And the beak of the owl is used in a similar fashion to scissors. They're able to rip and tear and cut that food that they pounced onto. So let's go to the next skull, and Brittany is going to talk to us about that.
So right here we have our pileated woodpecker. So our woodpeckers, they like to eat a lot of different insects, fruits, and nuts. What's really cool about woodpeckers is that they have a very long tongue. Their tongues are so long that it wraps around their brains. Another cool fact about woodpecker tongues is that they have hooks on their tongues, very similar to hooks, and they use those to actually grab hold of the insects that they're eating. Now, as Dave mentioned, we're going to be thinking about things at home that can be similar to this beak. Right here, I have needle nose pliers. As you can see, they're long, just like the beak of a woodpecker, and it's very pointy at the tip. It's very important for them to be pointy at the tip because they need to get those tiny insects that live within the bark of the tree, and so they have to have a sharp tip in order to get into those tiny cracks and crevices of the tree. Now right here we have my favorite bird. Right here we have a northern cardinal. They're really awesome birds. I see them up north where I live, and they migrate down here to the south, to South Carolina. So, as you can see, the beak of this bird is a little bit different than the others. It's not black, it's actually orange. The reason why this bird has an orange beak is because it has a different compound of keratin. And so it changes the color, and the way light reflects on this beak also affects that as well. You see that they're very small, and they like to eat a lot of different seeds and nuts. So right here, I have this nutcracker. Very similar to the northern cardinal. They like to have really strong beaks so that they can crack the nuts that they eat as they forage for different food items. All right. So now we're going to transition back into different characteristics, and we're going to be talking about hollow bones. So we know that birds have very hollow bones, and they also have some lattice or matrix inside of those bones. It is very important for birds to have hollow bones and for their lattice. The lattice or the matrix actually helps to keep the bone together so it isn't fragile. Now it's important because birds spend a lot of time in the sky, in the air, and we want to make sure that they don't have a lot of weight so they won't weigh themselves down. So it's important for them to have hollow bones so that they can be lightweight. All right, and our last and final characteristic that we're going to talk about is that they have large eyes. So birds have really good vision. If you're going to be looking all the way, if you're going to be all the way up in the sky, it's important for you to see down below. You guys have probably heard someone say a bird's eye view because they have really good vision. Now there are different characteristics that we didn't add up here, but these right here we thought to be the most important. So you can either look up some or you can ask some questions and we can answer some more different characteristics that they have tomorrow in our Q&A. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to transition over to a little virtual?
Yeah, so we definitely want to spend time, even, right now, just walking around for 5 or so minutes and looking for birds, listening for birds. Each bird has its own unique call or song. And if there's a lot of tapes that you can find online that you can learn all these different calls. And so we're going to just walk around for a little bit and just maybe talk a little bit about migration, maybe about some other characteristics about birds. And then stop along the way. And if we hear a bird, I'll mention what bird it is. And then you could always replay this class and look that bird up and see if you can put a picture of a bird to the call. So in regards to things that you need, of course, if you have binoculars, they are very helpful. However, you could still do bird watching without binoculars. Again, if you have access to a bird book, that's great. But again, it's something that you really don't even need. You could just try to get as many characteristics about the bird, where you saw the bird, what it looked like, the colors, the beak shape, and bring all that information and look it up online. And there's some real good resources out there that help you be able to identify birds. So let's go ahead and, we have our binoculars ready. I have a bird book, and we're just going to go ahead and head around. And our goal is to get around to our bird feeding station to see if there's some birds that are finally kind of waking up. It rained this morning, so the sun is starting to peek out. So the birds are hungry, so they're going to want to get to some easy food to get their day started. So come on with us, and we'll just go on a short walk. So one thing it's also good to know where to look. We have a lot of large live oaks out here at Barrier Island, and a lot of these oaks are hollow inside. So if just looking at this one oak here, I see several holes or tree cavities that would make an excellent place for a bird to nest. And we frequently, even earlier this morning, we saw what's called a great crested flycatcher. And there's a male and female that have paired up, and they are nesting in one of these tree cavities. And that is a pretty common species to find here. So let's go ahead and just walk a little bit further, and we'll see if we'll stop if we hear any different species. And there are ways that you could actually attract birds, because birds are curious. So if they hear a sound different than what they've been hearing, they will, not all, but some will frequently come sometimes within a few feet of you. So I'm going to try that, and I encourage you to try this when you're able to get outside and in your backyard or anywhere. You could do this noise, and it actually will sometimes attract chickadees and cardinals, Brittany's favorite, and the tufted titmouse. There's a lot of different birds that'll come. So I'm going to try it and then kind of teach you the sound, and then I encourage you to practice at home and try it out, because it really does work. And you can hear, we just heard that was the great crested flycatcher. It kind of has a weep, weep call. All right, let me do the pishing noise. hear some crows in the background. We're very fortunate to be right on the ocean, so you'll frequently see a lot of different species of birds besides the forest, you know, songsters. So we're going to walk around this this clump of trees. Again, we're going to make our way to the bird feeding station, and we're going to try it. Brittany and I are going to see how well we compare to other birds. We're going to do an experiment, and we encourage you to try this out with us. So let's go ahead. Okay, we ready to try this?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about, you know, birds are excellent flyers. You know, so if you think of how many times a bird will flap its wings, you know, so we're going to say this is going to be starting off in this position. We're going to say this and this would be one beat, and they've actually, you know, recorded how many times a certain species of birds will actually flap their wings per 10 seconds. So Brittany and I are going to try this for 10 seconds, and we encourage you to try this at home. And then I'm going to throw a couple characteristics out, or a couple things that how we compare to, say, a hummingbird or a crow. All right, so Abigail, are you ready for 10 seconds? We're going to see how many times we can flap for our arms, not our wings. Okay.
All right, hold still.
Okay.
Go. All right, stop.
Okay, I had 15 beats for 10 seconds. How many?
I had 13.
Okay, so we would not make good birds. So if you think of the American crow, which is found just about everywhere, they will flap their wings for 10 seconds, about 20 times. Carolina chickadee. A chickadee has a little black cap of feathers and it looks like a little black beard. They frequently come to our bird feeders, or yours at home as well. They flap their wings about 270 beats for just 10 seconds, compared to our 13 and 15. On the other, to the extreme, hummingbirds will beat their wings up to 700 times in just 10 seconds. It's incredible. You know, they are designed, you know, to be the ultimate, you know, flyers. So right around the corner here, we're going to kind of sneak up on the bird feeding station to see if we can get a couple looks of them. We do hear a lot of other, you know, we hear some laughing gulls that are kind of flying up above the trees. We have a couple of woodpeckers there on the trees. So right over here, and it very well could be a male and a female. They're red-bellied woodpeckers. And again, these are, you know, there's some birds that will migrate at the appropriate time. Other birds will stay there year-round, and that's the case in every state. So check them out. They're called red-bellied woodpeckers. They're pretty common. So let's go ahead, and Brittany and I are going to kind of walk this way and
Alright, so now since we're over here, we have these bird feeders. Bird feeders are a really good way for you to see different birds, especially a lot of migratory birds. We put a lot of seeds in there and just yummy food that they like to eat. So if you have some in your community or even at your house, you probably get to spot some really cool birds. Now, talking about birds moving around, we're actually going to talk a little bit about bird migration. So there's two different types of bird migrations. The first one is going to be our daily migration. So daily migration happens in the same habitat. So these birds aren't leaving their traditional homes in order to do this daily migration. What happens is birds leave their roost, okay? And the roost is just a common area where birds like to congregate, and that's where they'll have their nest as well. So they'll leave their roost, and then they'll go out and they'll forage. They're going out to forage for different foods, such as seeds and insects and different fruits and things that they eat. And then by the time night hits, they'll come back, and then they'll just do it again tomorrow, which is why it's called daily migration. Now, the second migration might be the migration you've heard about, maybe in class or maybe even on television or a documentary. Did we see something?
Yes. That was the red-bellied woodpecker. That was so cool.
So there's a great example right there. That's why it's important to have these bird feeders if you want to spot really cool birds. So our second migration is going to be our seasonal migration. Now, seasonal migration is the one you hear about most commonly. So this is when birds from one habitat, they leave their habitat and they go to a different habitat somewhere else in the globe. Now, typically the way it works is that in the fall, birds like to go south, like down here, South Carolina, and then in the spring, they like to go up north. A great example of this would definitely be my favorite bird, the northern cardinal. So I live in Illinois, up north, and we have northern cardinals all over the place. I see them in my backyard, and here in South Carolina, I see them as well because they like to migrate south, especially during the fall. So another thing that we're going to talk about is why birds migrate. So birds migrate for two main reasons. They migrate because of temperature change. These birds, they don't want to be too cold and they don't want to be too hot. They are endothermic, so they can regulate their own body heat, but they want to make sure that they're very comfortable. So they like to leave depending on the temperature. If it's too cold or if it's too hot in the location, they'll leave. And another reason is for food. So we know that different parts of the world, especially here for our country, we have a lot of different plants that blossom and bloom at different times. And so it's important for these birds to follow where their food is growing. So they might leave one area to go to another area where the food is nice and luscious. There also have been bird species that are known to flee or fly away or migrate during large droughts, when there isn't a lot of food at all, or when there's a lot of rainfall. For example, if you are a bird living in the deep rainforest in Costa Rica, you would probably migrate out because of all the pressure that the rain is creating. So right there, we got to see some really cool birds. We learned a little bit about migration. And now what we're going to do is we are going to transition out. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for all the students, the teachers, friends, and family as well for tuning in. Don't forget that tomorrow we will be answering all your questions that you posted in the comment section. And that will be at 11 o'clock, just like this video took place today. And we also want to remind you that we will be posting this video on YouTube. So if you wanted to view it, to hear different birds or see some different birds that you saw, then you can just go to the YouTube page and then you can see the video as many times as you would like.
And I just encourage you to be a part of the birding world. You know, it's something that you could do anywhere you go. You know, whether you live in the city, the country, you could do bird watching in your own backyard. And again, you don't need a whole lot. And it's really a wonderful hobby to get involved with. So, but again, we thank you so much for joining us on this day, and we encourage you to ask questions and leave those comments for us that we can answer for you tomorrow at 11 a.m. So thank you.
Bye. Thank you.